Now we're on Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis, and we're talking about Rosh Chodesh Adar. And Mashmiim, not only al Ashkolim, but also al Kilayim. So when you plant together different species of, let's say, Yerokos or Zroim or Peros, Peros Elon, then there's a violation of the Isur Kilayim. Not only that, not only is the planting also, but even L'kayim Isur Kilayim, to keep it in one's field. On the first of Adar, Bezin announces that one must uproot the sprouts of seeds that appear amongst the grains, because if there's seeds other than grains that are growing near the grains, then you have a problem of kilayim. Bishlam al kilayim. I understand why Bezdin would tell people about the Isur Kilayim on Aleph Adar, really, because that's the time of planting. Elal Ashkolim Minolan. Why should Adar be the right time to announce the Shkolim? What's the source from which we derive that it's in Adar that we're going to announce the Shkolim? Omar Tavi, Omar Yoshia, Omar Kra, because the pasuk says in Bamidbar Chav Ches, Zoso last, right in Parshas Pinchas, Zoso last Chodesh B'Chodjo, Omar Torah Chadesh V'Havei Karban Mitruma Chadasha. So it says in the pasuk, Zoso last Chodesh B'Chodjo L'Chodche Hashana, and this idea of Chodesh B'Chodjo is the renewal of the new moon, which is on Rosh Chodesh. And it's a Truma Chadasha, it's this year's Truma. So the Torah is telling us that on one particular Rosh Chodesh, we don't know exactly which one it is, that's when we buy the Karbanos Tzibur from the new Truma, meaning the new year of Truma. The Kevan de Benisan Boy Akrube B'Truma Chadasha, and it's Dafka the month of Nisan that we're going to bring Karbanos from this new year's Truma. Therefore, Kadmina v'Karina b'Yachad b'Adar, already we announced the Shkolim 1 month in advance. Ki hechi d'leisu Shkolim l'migdash. So everybody would have a full month to bring his half a shekel to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, it's a little bit strange because if I remember correctly in the Gemara in Shkolim, it would seem like the Gizbar would actually make the rounds. But here you get the impression, l'migdash, that they would bring the matzah shekel to the Beis HaMikdash. And I guess it all depends what's the relationship to the regel, right? If they're near a regel, so they're going up to the, to the Mikdash anyway to celebrate the holiday, then they would bring their shkolim with them. But if it was between one regel and another, then they didn't necessarily have to make the trek to Yerushalayim. The Gizbarim would collect their shkolim. Now the Gemara wants to know, why do we need a 30-day period, such a long period of time, to prepare for what seems to be a relatively simple action, a simple mitzvah of Matzah Shekel? Kiman, the lo Reb Shimon Gamliel, the Reb Shimon Gamliel, ha'amar shtei Shabbosos. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, when you want to prepare for something, then you begin 2 weeks in advance, but not a full month. Whereas the Chachamim disagree with Reb Shimon, and they want to give you a full month. The Sanya, where is this machlokes between Reb Shimon Gamliel and the Chacham recorded in a brayso about Sholem Bilchas HaPesach or Pesach Shloshim Yom? According to Tanakama, we need 30 days to prepare for Pesach, and during that 30-day period, we will study the laws of Pesach. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Omer Shtei Shabbosos, all you need is 2 weeks. So the time for the Shkolim announcement would depend upon the Machlokas Tanakama and Rav Shimon Gamliel. According to Rav Shimon Gamliel, you would announce the Shkolim 2 weeks before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But our Mishnah reflects the Shita Tanakama, a full 30 days. And now the Gemara wants to reconcile our Mishnah with Rav Shimon Gamliel. Afilu Teim Rav Shimon Gamliel, Kevan Diomar Mar. Since the Mishnah says, B'chamisha Sarbo Shulchanos Yoshvin B'Medina, U'B'chavhei Yoshvin B'Migdash, is Mishum Shulchanos, Kadminan V'Karinan. Even Rav Shimon Gamliel would agree that although all you need in general as a preparation period is 2 weeks, but here we need a full month. And why is this so? Because of the money changes, right? Not everybody had an exact change, a half a shekel. So they needed the Shulchani, who's the money changer, and he would sit and have his duchan, and that's where he would exchange people's money so that he would give them half shekels. And on the 25th of Adar, Yoshvim b'Migdash, they would sit in the Beis HaMikdash, Mishum Shulchanos Kadminan U'Makarinan. And therefore, because the money changes are available in the provinces on the 15th, in order to collect or at least facilitate the collection of Machzah Shekel, therefore 2 weeks before the Shulchanos, we're going to already cash in order to exchange our currency in order to acquire Machzah Shekel. So we're going to read the Parsha of Shkolim on Rosh Chodesh Adar, a full month before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, even according to Rav Shimon Gamliel. My Parsha Shkolim, Rav Omar, Machlokes Rav and Shmuel Tsav, Es Bnei Yisrael Ma'atalem, Es Karbani Lachmi, Es Shmuel Omar Ki Tisa. So we understand Shmuel very well. Ki Tisa is the Parsha of Shkolim. But Rav says that we're reading an entirely different Parsha. It's Karbani Lachmi, which is a reference, I believe, to the Talmud. Am I right? Or is it to the book? Just 1 second. What do you say, Rabbi?
Regular daily korban.
Yeah, it's a korban Talmud, a daily korban, right? Sabbath Bnei Yisrael is Karbani Lachmi. That's very strange. The Gemara says, Bishlei Man the Omar Ki Tisa, Hainu de Karle Parsha Shkolim, the Ksibe Shkolim. That's where the Chiv Shkolim is in Parsha Ki Tisa. El Man the Omar es Karbani Lachmi. Right, according to the Shita, which is Rav, that we're reading the section of Karbani Lachmi. So what's got to do with Shkolim? Midi Shkolim Ksibe Hasam? What says in? You could call this parsha of Karbani Lachmi Parsha Shkolim. Why? Time of my kid Rabbi Tavi. So here we have Rav Tavi. So let's go over Rav Tavi. Rav Tavi was the one who said that the mitzvah of Machzas HaShekel is for the purpose of Karban Tzibur. And the primary Karban Tzibur is the Talmud. So Karbani Lachmi, which is the Karban Talmud for the purpose, and the purpose of collecting the Machzas HaShekel is to buy the Karban Talmud as a Karban Tzibur, and therefore it makes sense to read the Parsha of Karban Talmud as a reading of Parsha Shkolim. And that's what we said before, that the new the new Trumas Halishka of this new year was dipped into on Rosh Chodesh Nisan in order to buy the Karbanos Tzibur. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is like the Rosh Hashanah for Karbanos Tzibur. Bishlem Ilmandi Omar Tzavis B'nei Yisrael Mishum Dichsive Karbanos Hasan. Kidravitavi, as we explained before. Elamandi Omar Kitisa Karbanos Miksive. No mention of Karbanos in that section. So how do we indicate through the Kriya that the whole purpose of the Masechet Shekel contribution is for the purpose of purchasing a carbon tzibur? The Gemara answers by saying Shkolim Ladonim Ksive. That we're talking about. No, this is actually part of the Gemara's Kashim. So why in this parsha are we collecting the Shkolim? Not for the Karbanos Tzibur, which would explain why we read it on Rosh Chodesh Adar, but rather the Shkolim that we're reading about, according to Man Yomar Kitisa, that's Shmuel, are Shkolim that are dedicated for the Adonim. The Adonim, when the Mishkan stood, there were bases on the bottom of the Mishkan that held up the crushing, and they were made of silver. And they took the Shkolim and they bought whatever bases they needed for the building of the Mishkan. But that's not what we're reading here on Rosh Chodesh Adar. That's not the Shkolim we're interested in. So why are we reading the Pasha Shkolim La'Adonim? And the Gemara answers, Kiritani Rav Yosef, Shalosh Trumasein. In other words, the word Truma means that 3 times we are mafresh Truma, some sort of separation. And they all appear in the 30th chapter of Vayikra. 3 times the Torah repeats the word Truma. What are the 3 times? One is Shel Mizbeach La Mizbeach. So we're talking about using the Truma to buy Karbanos for the Mizbeach. Shal Adonim le'Adonim. The second Truma is that we collect contributions of silver, of Masechet Shekel, for the bases. And finally, the third Truma is Shal Bedek Habayis LeBedek Habayis, right? We need monies in the various kupos in order to earmark those monies for the building of the Beis Hamikdash or the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash. He calls it maintenance here. So Gemara now says the following: Bishlei v'leman diyomer kitisa hainu deshani hayrosh chodesh mishar roshei chadashim. So in other words, this is not the classic Kriya of Rosh Chodesh, and that makes a lot of sense. We have a different purpose here in order to notify the people about the Shkolim. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to read the same identical parsha of the Talmud Shel Shachar that we read on every Rosh Chodesh and read it now Rosh Chodesh Adar. Elamad v'yomer tzav es karbani. Now you're reading the parsha of the Karban Talmud, my shani. I mean, every Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, that's exactly what we read, Shabbos Karbani, which is the parsha of the Karban Talmud that has in it a special section for Rosh Chodesh. The Gemara answers shani te'ilu Roshei Chadashim Karashisa bin Yonah Diyoma. We only call it 6 kruim. Okay, we have to see what that means. 6 kruim. I mean, Rosh Chodesh we have 4 kruim. Why does it say 6? Yeah, we're not talking about a regular Rosh Chodesh on a weekday. He's talking about Rosh Chodesh on Shabbos. And when he says 6, he means that the 6 Kruim will read the regular Parshas HaShavua and Chad b'Rosh Chodesh. And we'll add a seventh Karu who's going to read the Parsha of Rosh Chodesh. So this is what happens during the entire year when Rosh Chodesh coincides with Shabbos. But now if Rosh Chodesh coincides with Rosh Chodesh with Adar, Shabbos coincides with Rosh Chodesh Adar, then Kulu bid Rosh Chodesh. We do not read the regular parsha, we just read the Rosh Chodesh parsha. He says here that the Shabbos parsha reading is superseded by the parsha of the Shkolim. So that every single karu of all the seven will be reading a section of the Rosh Chodesh Kriya. And that clearly means that the Kriya of Rosh Chodesh Adar is radically different than it is. And again, when I say Rosh Chodesh Adar, I mean on Shabbos, than it is on any other Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos. Hani Chulaman di Omar, let's say their Parshios Hu Choser. Elaman di Omar, let's say their Aftoros Hu Choser. Who Parshasa di Yoma Karinon is my Shani. So the Gemara says that this explanation that we make a difference between the reading of the Parsha of Rosh Chodesh when it Adar, when it coincides with Shabbos, as opposed to Rosh Chodesh on any other Rosh Chodesh on a Shabbos, that makes sense according to one Man Diyom. The Man Diyom, let's say their Parshios Hu Choser, which means that after the Dalit Parshios, we go back to the Seder HaParshios, the regular order of the Parshios. So in other words, our Mishnah says that after the Dalit Parshios that have been read on, respectively, of 4 different Shabbosos, then we are Choser, we go back to the regular Seder HaParshios. So it means that for 4 different Shabbosos, we completely override the Seder HaParshios, and instead, we read those special kriyos. Elaman di Omar l'Seder Aftoros Hu Choser. But according to the Man di Omar who says that we read the regular Parshios on those 4 Shabbosos, and the Haftoros that would normally be read on those Parshios when it was a regular Shabbos, not one of those 4 Shabbosos. Now on those 4 Parshios, we will substitute the regular Haftorah for the new Haftorah, Parsha di Yom Karina. However, we read the regular Parsha of Shabbos even on those 4 occasions of the Dalit Parshas. Is then Maishna. So again, we're stuck. We're trying to figure out when Rosh Chodesh Adar coincides with Shabbos and we read Parsha Shkolim. Well, now we're saying, according to Rav, the Parsha Shkolim is the identical Parsha that we read on any Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. So my Shani, my answer is Shani. There is a difference. Ilu Roshei Chadashim Karushita Binyani Diyoma. When Rosh Chodesh coincides with Shabbos the rest of the year, excepting Adar, then we read 6 from the regular Parsha, 6 Aliyos. The Chad Kari b'Rosh Chodesh, and the 7th we'll read the section of Rosh Chodesh. Ve'ilu ha'idna, but now we're talking about Shabbos on Rosh Chodesh Adar. Karu Tlasa Binyamin Diyoma. We'll only dedicate 3 aliyos to Binyamin Diyoma. We're going to have to collapse the entire parsha into 3 aliyos. The Arba And now we'll have the regular reading for Rosh Chodesh with 4 olim, 4 kruim. Arba karu kin Rosh Chodesh. And this is not at all similar to what happens when Shabbos coincides with another Rosh Chodesh, because then we're going to read the entire parasha with 6 aliyos. Here, we're going to read the entire parasha on Rosh Chodesh Adar with 3 aliyos. Meisvei, Gemara asks the Kashan Rav, Rosh Chodesh Adar shech aliyos b'Shabbos, korim b'parshas shkolim, umaftirim b'Yehoyada Kohen. So what's the kash on Rav over here? According to Shmuel, says keep tisa. Hainu, we understand the choice of the maftir of Yehoyada Kohen. Why? This is a Parsha Malachim Beis. Did Damilo. What's the similarity here between Kitisa and the Haftorah of Yehoyada Kohen? The Chsiv, with regard to Yehoyada Kohen, it says, Kesef Nafshos Erko, the money of his valuation of persons. And that's a reference to Chatzi Shekel. Elaman Diomes Karmani Lachmi, me dummy, what's the similarity between the Torah reading itself of the Karban Tamid and the story of Yehoyada with regard to a half shekel tax? Tamid, Kiderab Tavid. Meaning that when it says Daber Bnei Yisrael, it's an obligation to contribute half a shekel. So it means that even in the Kriya itself of the Talmud, there's an indication of Machzis HaShekel. Right? That's because it's a Karban Tzibur, I believe. Let me just 1 second. Right, because Rabbi Tavi has already established that the Masechet Shekel was earmarked for a Karban Tzibur. So we're reading the Parsha of the Karban Tzibur. And then it makes sense to add the Haftarah of Yehoyada of Kesef Nefashos Erko, which is again a reference to the Masechet Shekel. Meisvei, the Brisa says that Chal Lios of a Parsha Smuchala. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Shabbos, and let's say that Torah portion for that Shabbos was very close to the Parsha of Shkolim. Bein milfanel, bein lachrea, koronos of koflanos. Obviously, Melandi Omer Kitisa, Hainu de Misrami Bahu Zimna. You could have at that time of the year of Adar the Parsha of Kitisa. Elamandi Omar Tzaves Karbani, Minas Rami Bahu Zimna. Do we ever read that parsha in Vayikra around the time of Rosh Chodesh Adar? I mean, that parsha is in Pinchas. That's read in the summit. And what says in? Right, it all depends upon where you are on the globe. The Bnei Ma'arav, the Maski, the Dorais of Platshonim, they spread out the reading of the Torah amongst 3 years, so they only read 1/3 of the Torah each year. And then it's very possible that Karbani Lachmi will be read right before Rosh Chodesh Adar. Tanya Gavasi Shmuel, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechalios B'Shabbos, Korin, Kitisam Aftir Yehoyada Kohen. I mean, you can't get more explicit. This is black and white Shmuel. So I'm not sure if at this point the Gemara is actually accepting Shmuel and rejecting Rav. I don't know. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechalios B'Shabbos Motziin Shalosh Toros. We take out 3 Sifrei Torah. The Korban Echad B'Inyano Shel Yom, the Parshas HaShavua for Shabbos, Echad B'Shal Rosh Chodesh. The Echad B'Ki Tisa, because it's Rosh Chodesh Adar, and we have to reach Golim. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Rosh Chodesh, Tevei Shechalios B'Shabbos, Mevin Shalosh Torahs V'Korim Behem. Why? Echad B'Inyano Shel the Parshas HaShavua, Echad Rosh Chodesh. The Echad the Chanukah, because Rosh Chodesh Tevis is always during Chanukah. We need a separate Kriya of the Chanukah Samizbeach. Utzricha, why did Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka have to repeat the same idea? If he'd only said about Rosh Chodesh Tevis, Rabbi Yitzchak, we would have assumed that Rabbi Yitzchak would require 3 different Sifrei Torah on Rosh Chodesh Tevis. Shechalios B'Shabbos. But with regard to Rosh Chodesh Adar, if we hold like Rav the Omer Parsha Shkolim es Karbani Lachmi, Shtei Torah Sagi would be sufficient to read from 2 Sifrei Torah because the Shkolim reading and the Rosh Chodesh reading are exactly identical. Mashmalah and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka wants to teach us that this is not so. He accepts the Shita of Shmuel. And therefore, we're going to need a 3rd Sefer Torah to read from Parsha Shkolim and Kitisa. No, so why didn't he just tell us the din that on Rosh Chodesh Adar that falls on a Shabbos, we take out 3 Sefer Torah, and then we could derive by analogy the case of Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechalios B'Shabbos. And the Gemara says Chada Mechal Chaverta Itmar. Rabbi Yitzchak was only stating one ruling regarding Rosh Chodesh Adar, and then the Talmidei Chachamim, who were students of Rabbi Yitzchak, came after Rabbi Yitzchak, they deduced this analogy between Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechalios B'Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechalios B'Shabbos. Itmar, we learned Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechalios B'Shabbos. Rabbi Yitzchak Karu Tflas B'Rosh Chodesh. They read 3 aliyos from Rosh Chodesh, Chad b'Chanukah. So now we're talking about Chol. We're talking about a weekday. Rav Dimi Dibin Chayfa Amar Karu Tflas b'Chanukah and Chad Rosh Chodesh. Now, what's the main reading here? Is it the Rosh Chodesh reading or the Chanukah reading? And Nafkamid is how we divide up the Kriya. Amar Av Mani Kavasi Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka Mistabra. Tadir v'sheina tadir tadir kodem. Rosh Chodesh is tadir, and therefore we should give it preference, and we should call up 3 kruim for the Rosh Chodesh kriya. Amar Oven, he says the exact opposite. Kavas l'Rabbi mistabra mi garam l'Revi sheyavo Rosh Chodesh hilchash Revi Rosh Chodesh boy mikra. It's always Revi that's called up for Rosh Chodesh. Garam l'Revi sheyavo. So in other words, if it wasn't Rosh Chodesh, how many kruim would there be on Chanukah? Only 3. We add a 4th karu because Rosh Chodesh, so it makes sense that the last kriya, which is called Revi, should be the Rosh Chodesh kriya. My Havi Allah, what's the final psak? Rabbi Yosef, or Mashgichim b'Rosh Chodesh. Don't concern yourself for Rosh Chodesh means the Ikar Kriya is Chanukah. Rabbi Amar, Mashgichim b'Chanukah, the Ikar Kriya is Rosh Chodesh. So we get to my Havi Allah and we end up with the same machlokas that we started with. The Hilchasa ein Mashgichim b'Chanukah. Rosh Chodesh Ikar, we read 3 kruim, we call 3 kruim for Rosh Chodesh and only the 4th karui for Chanukah. Okay, so we're going to stop here with Itmar, which is 1.5 lines before the end of the Omen, which Mitzvah will pick up tomorrow.